Guys, welcome to another episode of the Sharma Show. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. Thank you for everyone who's in the live chat. Thank you for everyone that's going to be watching us later on. I've got someone who I've had on the show before, and I really enjoyed talking to him earlier, and I thought it'll be a good time to have him back on since it was a Democratic debates, and we could discuss the debates and we could discuss a bunch of other stuff. And I just had fun talking to him before, so please help me welcome back to the show, Rajiv Satyal. Rajiv, welcome back.
Hi, Sham. How are you, man? Good to be back. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm good. And I see you were in India recently. How was that for you?
India is great. It was my first time this year. I went 3 times last year. I love going to India. I was only in Bombay for 4 days. That's it. Landed on a Thursday morning, left on a Monday night. So far too short. Got to see family, got to do a show, and
Nice.
Headed back. That was it.
What's crazy is what you told me offline is that you've even been to Bihar, which I've never heard any Indian or any person that lives outside of the United States that has been to India ever say. You're the first person. So what were you doing in Bihar?
I know it sounds like I got lost or something, but no, we had a great time in Bihar. Actually, this was you're up in the Chicagoland area. My friend Azhar Usman, who lives up in Des Plaines, outside in the Chicagoland area as well. His family's from Bihar, and so when he and I had started Make Chai Not War, and we traveled around the United States, did 10 shows here. So Make Chai Not War is a Hindu-Muslim comedy showcase, and we did it to bring people together. We had Christians on the show, atheists, we had Sikhs, we had Jewish folks, obviously Muslims, and of course Hindus, since that's what I am. And we brought people together to do stand-up and toured around. Then the U.S. State Department got a hold of us under Obama, not Trump, luckily. And it sent us to India. And so we did a 7-city tour of India, including a stop in Patna, because his family is from Patna. I think English was probably a third language, if anything, but we got mobbed at the mall. We got a great reception at the show. And it taught me how much of comedy and communication is nonverbal, probably 90%, because I'm not sure that they could even totally understand what I was saying, but because I was so animated and laughing and smiling, somehow the show went well, and they were just some of the nicest people ever. So love to go back to Bihar someday.
Wow, that's amazing. What did you think of Bihar in general?
We were in and out so fast. I think we got in that day, we spent the night there, and we left, and it was not what I expected in the sense of, I mean, again, or not again, but this is sort of the stereotype or the impression was that it was really poor and it was really backwards, and that's what I had heard from people, and I didn't really find that to be the case. I felt like it was a place on the come up. I felt like people were excited and they were happy, and I don't know, again, maybe I saw just a very, very small sliver of it. Of course, I'm there to do a show, so I didn't see the undersides of most of the cities that I go to, whether they're Vegas or Bangkok or Patna. But we had a great time, great reception.
That's awesome. So in your line of work, I assume you probably come into contact with a lot of comedians, a lot of American comedians, and particularly, I suppose, a lot of comedians that are either from India, performing in India, or Indian origin, performing in the US. And one of the things that, and we were just talking about this offline, that one of the things that I've noticed in whatever comedy that I've watched from Indians, whether they're Indian origin in the US or in India, is their comedy tends to lean quite heavily left, and they're pretty strongly on the left politically. Their comedy tends to lean that way. We were talking about you in the previous episode, and you said you vote Democrat, you have a sympathy towards Democrats, and you lean Democrat. But I would still not classify you as left in the 2019 definition of the left. I'd classify you more as like a regular old liberal, like an old school sort of liberal that tries to see good points on both sides of the spectrum, which is what I like to think of myself, even though many people don't see me that way, but I like to think of myself that way. And certainly I see you that way. So in your interaction with these comics and whatever you've seen of those comics, have you noticed that as well?
Yeah, it's a good observation. I mean, honestly, most entertainers, including comedians, lean left. And the reason is that generally entertainers are looked at as the jester, the court jester. You've got the king giving the orders, whoever that is, as part of the establishment. And comedians tend not to be part of the establishment. There's a great part of Colin Quinn's show, as you know, I'm on tour with my show, The Man in the Middle, political Colin Quinn, the established comedian here in the United States, had a really short aside, and I'm going to need to memorize the exact words, but it was probably the funniest part of Red State, Blue State, his show that came out this year in 2019, where he said something about, somebody said to him, well, why don't you just be a little bit more mainstream or something like that? And he goes, yeah, that's why I got into this game, just to parrot back of society's beliefs of himself. That's why I got into it. Probably every comedian, it was our favorite part, because you're like, that's exactly right. The reason is we have to be offending people on the edge, pushing the envelope. People are like, I think the comedian went a little too far. Yes, then we did our job. You're supposed to go a little too far, because if we're not pushing the boundaries of society, then it's kind of like failure. Like when you start doing something and it feels icky and weird, and you're like, man, this just kind of hurts. Yeah, that's right. That means learning. They say you can't look good and get better at the same time. Whatever it is, whether you're cooking or you're sharpening knives. We just saw Knives Out, so knives are in my head. Whatever you're doing.
I've been meaning to see it.
Oh my gosh, it's so good. I think I'm here in Austin. So I'm on Central Time right now, Austin, Texas, with my wife and her family. Her parents and she and I went to go see it last night. It is really good. 96% on Rotten Tomatoes, and earned every splat or non-splat, I guess, as the case may be. So that tends to be the case, though, is that people, entertainers, will push the envelope and be a little bit left. That said, there are some right-leaning comedians, but most of us, I would say, lean left.
Yeah, and I feel like, particularly, let's sort of focusing on the Indian community overseas, or the Indians overseas. Do you feel like some of these comedians, when they represent things that are happening with the Indian community overseas or with India, that they represent it in a way that ties into their views politically, and that can sometimes color the story that they're trying to tell, and then color the opinion that non-Indians or even Indians overseas have of what is going on with the Indian community or with India?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I have been someone who, I don't know that I've really ever embellished on stage, because that is really my life, and it's a little bit more grounded, and I'm witty, not wacky, and so I don't have this sort of exaggerated persona on stage. But I admire all comedians across many comedians across the spectrum, including the ones who are larger than life. So that's not a knock. It's just more my own experience. That said, I think that people, comedians included, tend to embellish. They tend to, what do they? I read a review. I actually wrote a review of Breaking Bad versus The Wire, and the only borrowed equity I used, and I called it out in my review on Medium, was they said that sometimes The Wire bent the story to fit reality, and Breaking Bad bent reality to fit the story.
Right.
And I thought that was a really great dichotomy, and most storytellers will bend reality to fit their story. And that maybe has held me back a little bit, because I've been a little bit careful to, I think stereotypes are true, but I think that I've been a little bit slow to go, well, all Punjabis do this, or all Biharis do that, or all Tamil people do this. It's like, well, not all. And so in comedy, though, and in joke telling form, you want to say all, because it's just simpler, just the point, instead of having all these caveats and tangents. So when it's a little bit more black and white, it's easier. So yes, I would say that if you were only to get your news from comedians in India, that would be just as warped as getting it from, a right-wing person or whatever in India or anywhere else.
Yeah, and I do think, with some of the prominent comedians, with some of the prominent commentators on India, they often lean left, and so when they speak about things that are going on in India, it tends to color the narrative, and they tend to make I just feel like they tend to make statements that maybe are not the best researched, maybe are not in touch with reality as much as they think it is. And that again brings me to another thing that I feel is very interesting about comedians that do political shows, and there's a lot of them these days. You have from Jim Jeffries to John Oliver to Hasan on Netflix. You have a lot of out and out comedians that are doing quote unquote serious political shows under the garb of comedy. And so it becomes very interesting. I remember one of the criticisms that Hasan got after his Indian elections video. He said that, why are you guys coming after me? I'm a comedian, And I've heard that quite a few times, like when a comedian says something and like makes a strong political statement or does like a political routine, and then people sort of criticize him for getting something wrong. Then he says, dude, I'm a comedian. My job is to make jokes. Why do you take me seriously? That's an interesting, that's an interesting situation. Well, okay, you're doing a show on Netflix watched by millions of people where you're clearly working to form public opinion about India or issues related to India in a certain way. When your attempt is maybe misguided or wrong, I think people have the right to call you out on it. And I wanted to get your take on it as to, when does comedy stop in these shows, and where does serious political discourse begin?
It's a great question. When I was a single man, I would be pretty proactive about walking up to women in bars. And, I was pretty good at it, and people would, and I was really bad at it for a long time. So it's not like I was born good at it. I was bad at it and not bad at it in the sense that I would be good at talking to people always. But, if I was going in with that agenda, I would get all nervous, as most men do. But I didn't think that good at it. And, you fail enough at something.
Exactly.
Figure it out. And so I remember, one of my friends, my male friends, like, you're really good at that. And I go, yeah, but I never really thought about this, but if I had to analyze it, I could always step back and punt and say I'm just joking, right? Because I'm a comedian, and I can always pull the comedian card, and so that's not really a road or a path a lot of men could take, because they couldn't be like, oh, I'm a stand-up comic. It's like, well, no, you're not, or unless you are. So I think that gave me a lot of confidence to be able to just kind of say whatever. And then if it didn't work or didn't land, you're kind of like, oh, I was kidding. And here's the card. Like, if it really went bad, you hand them a business card. That's when you really failed. And so I think that's where, when you're a comedian making a political commentary, the second thing I would say with that is, people care what you say. I mean, even if you're the smallest, shortest introvert in the room, your friends will still care what you say. Your family, people are, well, who cares what I think? It's like, well, if you make a bold statement, and then, I used to do this a lot, where it just used to be my speech pattern, Sham. I would just say, I'd make some crazy statement, and I'd be like, I don't know. Well, no, you know, because you just went on the diatribe, but now you're trying to back off and say, I don't know, or you're just trying to disarm the room or something.
Yeah, it's funny because Bill Burr does that. Like, he makes this crazy statement, and he goes, I don't know.
Which that's become part of his charm and part of his shtick. And he actually, I remember watching him early and thinking, as soon as this guy learns how to smile on stage, he's gonna bank. And I've always been for many years been a big Bill Burr fan, for probably 10 plus years. And I was like, the dude just needs to smile more. I love it. But it's just, I was watching some of Nikki Glazer's roast last night on just YouTube. It came up on my YouTube. And I was just done. It's her hardest hitting stuff is the stuff that I laugh at the hardest. Oh my gosh. So Burr was always good for me, but I was like, for the crowd to accept him, he's going to need to start to smile a little bit. So that's why he does his disarming things, like, I don't know. But similarly here, I think it is easy enough for a comedian to go to that precipice and then go, well, I don't know, I was just kidding. So I think they need to lean into it. I think if you're going to make a statement, you're telling the jokes you're telling for a reason. It's not every joke has truth behind it, but most of them do. And his slant, and most people slant, whether it's John Oliver, Jim Jeffries, or Hasan Minhaj, the people you mentioned, Jon Stewart, Stephen Colbert, and now even Colbert with the CBS Late Show. They definitely have a point of view. And so when you say something, that's almost like the messenger in 300, when Gerard Butler warns me, is realize that in Sparta, we're responsible for everything that we say, even if you're a messenger. And then he kicks the guy into the hole, right? The very big So you are responsible for your words, and you do have to own them. Yeah,
it's true. So I think we're in an interesting phase there with comedians doing serious political stuff, because there used to be a point when, like, serious journalists used to do serious political stuff, because that's where we wanted to get our politics from, because we knew that we'd get serious stuff. But now we have, like, comedians doing it, and I don't know, what do you, generally speaking, make of comedians doing this kind of serious political stuff? Do you think this is something that comedians should do? Do you think it's cool for comedians to do serious political stuff like this?
Yeah, I mean, I do. I think, first of all, I've
Mm,
never been, one of the questions I ask on my podcast is, with which quote do you vehemently disagree? And
right.
one of mine is, stay in your lane. I can't stand when people say
Okay.
stay in your lane, because it's like, look, and I've always taken this approach as a leader in corporate America, et cetera. If the janitor has a great idea, let's go with it. Like, who
Mm,
cares where the idea comes from? If it's a good idea, let's do it. And
mm,
I think comedians filled a void. And when Jon Stewart went on Crossfire back in the early zeros and
that's
called them
true.
out for not doing their job,
Yeah.
you know, if there's a void, this is how right-wing news started as well, or
Right.
anything, how the Japanese took over the TV market, right? Americans said
Mm,
they didn't want to do black and white TVs anymore. And so the Japanese started doing black and white TVs, and sooner or later they figured out how to do color TVs, and then Americans were out of the market, and we totally screwed ourselves. So if you don't take care of the market, somebody will. And so the media in this country, even though it's not as left-leaning as the right wing would have you believe,
mm,
it's still pretty moderate to a little bit left. And I know that annoys people on the right, but it does lean left. And you cannot trust the media, just like you can't trust big business or the
mm.
church, or a lot of church. I use that generally for
Sure.
religion. Any big thing has really sold out the people. And so how did the rise of Lorraine Grimm and Rush Limbaugh and all these other people come? They must have been filling a market need. I
Oh yeah.
loathe these people. I can't stand them, but they must have been filling a market need.
Mm,
And so similarly, when if the Newsroom, the first season of the Newsroom on HBO, where Aaron Sorkin makes the point, the idea in the public trust was 1/2 hour of news a night that wasn't going to have advertising, that was going to be a public trust, a public utility, public
right.
service. And instead, all the media companies, 6 of them own everything in America, and some even abroad, and they are going to do everything for profit. So what do? You increase your top line, you decrease your bottom line.
Mm,
And the biggest thing for decreasing your costs is you cut investigative journalism. You have people sit around at a
yeah.
round table. Have you seen CNN lately? It's literally 7 or 8 people sitting at this. It's not even a round
It's
table.
just panel discussions over and
It's a
over.
semicircle. It's this thing that's like branches out, because I don't even know. We didn't learn that shape in geometry. It's a curve, because there's so many people sitting there. It's not a round table. And so when you do that and you're saying, let's just pay people for their talking head opinion, well, they can spout off opinions, but they're not
Yeah.
necessarily spouting off facts. So that's where comedians jumped into that void. And, sometimes it's for better or for worse, I think.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. I wonder. I wanted to get your take before we talk about the Democrat debates.
Yeah.
I wonder if you read that, saw that headline in Washington Post where apparently they said that Obama is actually a conservative. I wonder if you read that part.
I've seen stuff about that. I don't know if I saw that particular article, but I've certainly seen things in that vein.
Yeah, yeah, and I wonder if what you make of that, because I remember that was not that long ago. I mean, I was alive, and I remember reading headlines when people were calling Obama the first socialist president of the United States.
Right.
So, do you think how do you think we're in a position now where Obama is considered a conservative? And there's people that agree with that assessment that Obama was actually, a conservative president. The reason the Washington Post article gives that Obama was a
Yeah.
conservative president because he was willing to work with the Republicans. He was willing to reach across the aisle and compromise with the Republicans to work on solutions that worked best for both parties and best for the people of the US. Does that make someone a conservative, or does that just make somebody trying to be a good
A
president?
moderate. I
Yeah.
think I think of myself as a moderate. So I
Yeah.
know before we went online, you were saying, do you identify as a liberal? Yes. Do I identify as a conservative? Yes. Do I identify mostly as a moderate? Yes. And so to
Yeah.
me, both ideas have both sides have good ideas. I think the left has a lot better ideas right now, but that's
Okay.
not always the case. And so I think with Obama, I appreciated what he said a few months ago about the circular firing squad, make sure that the Democratic candidates aren't just taking each other out, the
Yeah.
circular firing squad. And then he followed that up recently with talking about people who are, as I call them, over woke.
Yeah.
And in my opinion, Obama was a good president. He was the best president in my lifetime. That said, I think that there are a couple things. Definitions are changing.
Mm.
Time is moving on, and then there's more coming to light. And now with Trump, because see, every president leads to the next, right? Clinton
Mm.
led to Bush. You could even say Clinton was so bad he led to Bush. Bush was
Right.
so bad he led to Obama. Obama was so bad he led to Trump. Right? That would just be one way of putting it. And so you're seeing from the far left, like Bernie Sanders and to a lesser extent, but right there, Elizabeth Warren, the idea that because Obama didn't get the job done, he didn't go far enough in terms of social justice reforms.
Right.
We got Trump and we got a demagogue, someone who's promising these things and at least talking to the people in the white working class. So I would say that Obama was a centrist. I would say that he leaned left. And I think the difference between the Obama coalition and the Trump cult, and the reason I'll call it a cult, is because most Trump supporters will not criticize him no matter what.
Yeah.
And I don't know that I ever
No,
met.
I love the whole he's playing 4D chess and you don't even know it. That argument. Like,
it's crazy.
No,
he's not. He's id. He's pure impulse. He's pure cock and balls.
Yep.
I mean, that's really, he just follows his dick and he follows his gut literally into, this is what I need to eat, this is what I want to do, this is who I want to do, whatever. And so for me, Obama, I don't know that I met anyone, and maybe this speaks to the circles in which I run, who was a diehard Obama's never done anything wrong fan. Most of his coalition criticized him for killing people through drones, through the deportations, through not going for the public option or Medicare for all. Most liberals were pretty open about that. So that was one thing. Secondly, the definitions of liberal and conservative. Now it's like if you're a Trump supporter, you're a conservative. And if you're not, you're a liberal. And he's so warped and bent. It's almost like gravity in the space-time continuum, how gravity warps the space-time continuum.
Yeah.
It's almost like Trump has warped the liberal conservative continuum to the point where I know a lot of conservatives who don't support Trump, and I know a lot of Trump supporters who are not conservative. And the same thing on the other end of the spectrum.
Yeah, it's like, you remember, when Hillary lost in a lot of these battleground states, and everybody came out and said that everybody in these battleground states that voted for Trump is a racist. And I'm like, the same people in these battleground states voted for a black guy twice. So
one out of 9, or one out of, it's like 9 million, 1 out of 7, because he got 63 million votes. The math is crazy on this, even especially for Indians. 63 million votes. 1 out of 9 voted for, or maybe it was 1 out of 7, whatever it is. Let's just say 8 million. A lot of Trump voters voted for Obama.
Right.
And my brother, who lives in Brooklyn, his husband is from Wisconsin, and he sent me an article saying how racist people could still vote for a black president. And it was a good article, but I don't know that I totally agreed with it, because I think if you're really a deep-seated racist, I have a hard time believing that. I could see how you could hire a black plumber, but not a black president.
Yeah, exactly. Because you're essentially choosing someone to be a representative of you, your representative. He's representing you and your country to the world. So if you're this deep-seated bigot who, believes in the, higher race and all of that stuff, are you really going to choose a quote-unquote lower race to represent you and your country? I don't know.
And it's interesting because there's something called the Allport scale, and I don't know if we talked about this. A lot of people don't know about it. It's kind of like the Overton window that a lot of people don't discuss. The Overton window, as you know, I'm sure, Sham, but what is socially acceptable to discuss. And that's what Trump has succeeded in doing, is he comes in with a hard right position. And he extends the Overton window that when he sits down at the negotiating table, the left is kind of off the table and the right is on. So it is, in that way, he may be playing 4D chess. I agree there. But there's something called the Allport scale, where it measures, I think, from 0 to 6 or 1 to 6, the amount of racism in a society. And I think 0 or 1 are like jokes and harmless comments and things like that, which tells you a lot about how harmless jokes are, to our point earlier. And then 6 was all out, like just extermination and all that stuff. And so I've always made this distinction, and I think people find it a little bit, but this is why we do podcasts, right? Is to be controversial and push the line, push the limit. To me, there's a big difference between 6 and 5. There's a big difference between, and it's on, the analogy I'll give is almost like the ladder of achievement. And we had this in our classrooms, and a lot of what I've learned were on the signs in our classrooms, where the ladder of achievement was like 100% was I did, and then it was like 50% is I'm trying, or all these things, and 10% was I can't, and 0% was I won't. And I looked at that for hours, and I stared at it. I was like, wow, that's a really key distinction. Like, anybody can do 10%. Like, if you just try, that means maybe you just are not able, you can't. But 0% is, if you're the bottom of the ladder, you're not even going to put your foot up on the first rung. You won't. You're just not even, you're not even trying. It's a big distinction. And so for me, the same thing, the Allport scale, the difference between 6 and 5, is a 6 is like all out extermination and all that horrible stuff. And then 5 is like get these assholes out of the country.
Right.
And to me, there's a big distinction.
Hmm.
Yes, they're both awful and they're both racist, but number 6 is like you've got a master race that wants to take over the world.
Right.
Hitler level stuff where it's like this planet is ours. You don't even have a right to exist.
Right.
That is very different from get out of our country.
Hmm.
And if you can't see that, then you're a hard left liberal, because those are very different. They're both wrong.
Yeah. I mean, there's another one, right? There's like the grandpa on Thanksgiving that's just like, oh, these kids in hoodies in my parking lot. And then there's the guy that's like, oh, get out of my country. And then the guy that's like, all right, not only will you get out of my country, but I'm coming to take yours. You know? Yeah. So there's levels to it. They're all wrong, but there's levels to it.
It's like the difference between chauvinism and misogyny. They're both wrong, but chauvinism is a belief that males are better than females. That's wrong. I don't agree with it. But there are people who believe that. Whereas misogyny and misogynists are people who hate women. Those are two very different things, and they're rooted in two very different things. And again, both wrong, dismissing both of them. But I think that if we can't at least discuss some of the psychology of where these things come from and why a person could flip from a Trump to a Bernie voter, but would never vote for Biden or would never vote for a Hillary, then Democrats are missing a real opportunity here. And the same thing on the soft right, where you have like a John Kasich or a Mitt Romney, and to say, well, all Republicans and all people on the right are just against history and they just all suck and they're all racist. Well, I think that you're missing the point then.
Yeah, I think so too. And you know, that brings us in a good segue to the Democratic debates, because I don't know if you watched it, but I watched a little bit of it, and it was like if the sound meh came to life is what the debate was essentially. I mean, it was the same old stuff. It was a recycling of what happened in the previous debates. Essentially, there was nothing really any breakout performances or anything special that happened, apart from, you know, Biden putting his foot in his mouth a couple of times, which, you know, it just makes me feel bad for the guy now. Come on. It's just, come on. You don't need to do this. I don't know why he's doing it. But
I said the first.
What's that?
I said the first. I got the support of the only black woman in the Senate, and Kamala Harris, and he's like, I said the first. It's like, that's not what you said.
That's not what you said, man. Yeah. It's just, and then you remember when they asked him about like how do we solve the problem of domestic violence, and he was just like, we just have to keep punching at it and punching at it. I'm like, oh my God, this is real. This is on live TV.
And the room's laughing, and he's not getting it. And as a comedian, that's where you lost my vote, probably, where I'm just like, well, dude, if you're not going to get, you know, it's almost like what Donald Trump and Hillary Clinton were at I think it's the Al Smith Catholic dinner right before the election in 2016. I think they do it every year, every 4 years. And Trump's opening line was, hell of a dinner, hell of a dinner. And you're like, does he mean it? Does he get what he's saying? That it's Catholics and Christianity and hell? Or I think he didn't get it, because I'm watching it going, I don't think he knows he's being ironic. And he can't be.
I think he can be funny on Twitter. Like if he was just like this reality TV guy who just posted shit on Twitter, he would be so much more liked than if he was the crazy president of the United States. You know what I mean?
He's not a comedian.
That's exactly what it is.
He's the Joker when he said in 2008, although I like the new Joker movie too, but he's like, I'm like a dog chasing a car. I wouldn't know what to do if I caught it. He caught the car. He's the Joker who caught the car. That's exactly. He's the dog who caught the car.
Yes.
He has no idea. He's better off. Many of us have done this, where we handed the mic to a heckler who was drunk out of his mind on a Friday night. And he's not funny at all, because he's great in the audience. He's great at throwing dirt. He's great at throwing shade. But you give him the keys to the car, and
he doesn't know what to do with it. He'll just drive it off a cliff.
He goes off a cliff.
Yeah. So what did you make of the debates? Because what we're seeing now, I mean, I don't know if anybody's position really got affected too much by these latest debates. But what we've started to see now is there was a point where Elizabeth Warren was really surging, and she was pretty close to catching up with Biden. Biden's lead is somehow still pretty intact, and which I can't believe that, but it's still pretty intact nationally, and that's according to Real Clear Politics. And Warren seems to be declining, and we're in a position now where Bernie has started to just edge Warren in the national polls. From what you've seen, how do you see that panning out? Do you see Bernie gaining ground anymore? Because I feel like Bernie, people have been sleeping on that guy this year a little bit. They were pretty strong up, pretty hot on him in 2016, but this year they've just been like, I don't know. I think the opportunity is gone for him. But what people don't realize is that he's doing well in the polls, and he's raising an insane amount of funds from just from the public. So his fundraising is doing pretty well. He has enough money to go for a few more months easily, and his numbers are good. So do you think people are sleeping on Bernie? How do you see that panning out?
It's a great question. Sleepy Joe comes to mind when you say sleeping, and Joe Biden so close together. It's just so funny how those branding names stick. So probably 1 minute of background before I answer that question. Yeah, to answer your question, yes, I think people are sleeping on Bernie. As 1 minute of background, I would say that I want Donald Trump gone. I loathe Donald Trump. I can't stand him. I want to, with my show and in general, I like to bring people together. I like to bring liberals and conservatives together, Democrats and Republicans. But if Trump supporters, if you can't see how bad Trump is by now, then nothing I say is going to matter. It's just not going to make a difference. And so I think he's so corrosive, but I also think he's going to get reelected. And I've come to this conclusion over the course of the last few months. And most intelligent people to whom I speak believe that. And I don't know if we're all trying to delude ourselves, but or prepare ourselves, I guess I should say. But I do believe that. And I actually also agree with Bill Maher in that I don't think he's going to leave. I think he's going to be there at least 3 or 4 terms. And I'm totally about that. Yeah, because if you look at,
do you think that can happen in a country like the US?
I'm sorry.
Do you think that can happen in a country like the US where a president just says, yeah, I'm just going to keep going?
The answer to that question is, did you think anything that's happened in the last 3 years would ever happen?
That's true. But I feel like all of the stuff that's happened is still constitutional, right? Or no?
I don't think it is. I think well, yes and no. But now what he's doing with blocking people from testifying in the impeachment inquiry, it is unconstitutional. But the good thing about Donald Trump is he's exposing the weakness, right? He's exposing it's like stress testing. I was an engineer. You're stress testing. You're doing creep and fatigue testing on something, and you're learning. With fatigue testing, you're just constantly hitting at something. Creep, you're just like pressing down on it to see if it'll give stress or strain. And so, and the idea here, he's stress testing or strain testing the democracy of saying it's exposing some serious problems in terms of the unitary executive getting too strong versus the other 2 branches of government, added to the fact that the courts move too slowly. Even during an impeachment, yes, they said the circuit judge or federal judge, I think, said that Don McGahn, the president's former attorney before Rudy Giuliani, I believe, or no, maybe he was his White House attorney, had to testify. Now they're appealing it to the Supreme Court. These things have to move fast because I think that compelling him, Pompeo, Mulvaney, and Rick Perry to testify is key. Now, that said, if they do testify and they lie, he can pardon them. So the issue again becomes: do we live in a monarchy, and how much of this is a person just willing to push? And that's why where Trump supporters say, "Well, it's not written down." It's like, this is decent society, and you don't want all this stuff written down because you're the same people who are saying that the government's too strong and there are too many laws and there are too many rules and you're encroaching on our freedom. So, okay, well then, which one is it? Do you want that, or do you want us to write everything down? And there's a part in the British Office, or no, in Extras, where Ricky Gervais comes in and his manager is masturbating in the office. And he's just like, we talked about this. Like, we didn't talk about this. I didn't think I had to. Like, you should be tossing off over a pen. And it's like, you can't write down every single possible thing that a person shouldn't do, or will spend our entire lives writing things down. And so that's not the way.
That's a great example.
Right? So it's great. I didn't think I had to. So it's this wonderful part of that show. And so my point being this, that I do think that is going to happen. And here's my answer. I think that there are probably only 2 people who can beat Donald Trump. I do not think Liz and Bernie are 2 of those people.
Really? Not even Bernie?
No, I think what people are missing, and I was having this conversation over email with an acquaintance, but he sends me a lot of stuff, and he's based out in the Bay Area, and he sends a lot of good stuff. He seems to think it's the economy, stupid, which of course Clinton said famously, and his team said back in the early 90s. This is not economic. This is social and cultural. And I told him there's a Tom Petty line that says, loves Jesus and America too. It's a box set of things that traditional, real white Americans love, and that is Jesus in America, right? And they're a box set. And a friend of mine who's now votes liberal, he's out in Denver, Democratic Denver, but now he's voting Democrat, but he grew up as Republican. He said, my parents always just told me, you vote Republican and you go to church. And it's just mine. It's taken a lot for him to break out of that.
Wow.
And that's the issue right now. Like, real Indians are Hindu. Well, that's not true, but that would resonate with a lot of people. Even though that's not true. You could be Christian, you could be a non-believer, you could be Jewish, you could be Muslim. But real Indians, right, are real Americans are Christian, right? And it's like that's what's been drilled into people's minds. So are that many people going to move over to Bernie? I understand what people are saying about the flip spectrum, and he could win those voters over. It's just going to be too easy for Donald Trump to stand there and say that he's a socialist, and this country will go off.
It's hard to, I feel like that's the kind of stuff it's hard to sort of fight back against. Like, once a decent chunk of the population believes you to be a socialist in a country like America, where there's been so much fear mongering over the word socialist, whether rightly or wrongly, that's a different debate, but there has been a fair bit of fear mongering over the word socialist. So once you've been called a socialist, it's hard to really convince those people that you're not. And Absolutely. So a lot of the people that vote Republican, or lean Republican, have those feelings about Bernie. Now, whether or not he can convince them with the whole Medicare for All thing, which he sort of started this whole movement back in 2016. Yeah, wrote the damn bill. So whether or not he can do that, I mean, what do you feel about the whole thing that Bernie has about I'm working for the working class? And I'm sure there's a lot of working class people in the Rust Belt in Middle America that possibly that message could resonate with, that are struggling with like everyday expenses and exorbitant medical costs and all of that stuff.
It should. And the reason I do like Bernie and would absolutely vote for any of these folks on the left, would vote for them, I think that, and people are like, well, then how are you the man in the middle if you're going to vote for someone so hard left? First of all, he's not that hard left. Okay, that's a lot of the countries that we admire, like Finland and Sweden and a lot of the Scandinavian countries, and they are a blend of capitalists and socialists. It's capitalism with guardrails. If you look at Bill Maher's commentary from about 7-8 months ago, he talked about a cocktail, right? Gin straight is awful, tonic straight is awful, but gin and tonic together is a refreshing cocktail. And we already have socialism for the top 1%, and then the bottom, 40%. It's only us losers in the middle class who actually have to have capitalism, right?
Yeah.
So that's one. And two, the VA, Medicare, Social Security, a lot of stuff's already socialist. So people just like to say, well, let the markets decide. They have no idea what they're talking about. They don't know that the government buys, feed bins of storage grains and affects the prices. And people it's also amazing that people have opinions about so many things, because it's like, you don't know. How do you know? How do you know? You don't know anything. And so how do you have an opinion about this? So all I would say is philosophically, though, the other reason I would like Bernie is he would balance out the right from the last few years, too. So that's how we get back to the middle. So I think that the things that Bernie is talking about should resonate. My question is there critical mass?
Yep.
Maybe. But and the Bernie supporters, the diehard ones, are only voting for Bernie. I've talked to them, and I know a lot of them are only going to vote for him. And I read a long article about why we should be worried about Elizabeth Warren, and I can understand that she's more of a compromise candidate. I understand the difference between Bernie and Liz. That said, I think that the Democrats have like a 25-point advantage on healthcare.
Right.
And what people are going to hear in the soundbite world in which we live, and also it's harder to make a nuanced argument, and Democrats tend to be more nuanced and gray, and Republicans are more black and white, or more white. I think right now you've got a situation where people can just hear she wants to take away your healthcare. Right. And so that neutralizes your biggest gun against the Republicans. Is she's going to take away your healthcare? Well, that's the same thing they're saying about the Republicans. And so,
well, right now the biggest thing about her is that she's inauthentic. That's one of the big things. That, well, the things she says and the points she makes and whatever that comes out of her mouth is just not authentic. And that was a charge that got stuck to Hillary as well, and she just could not get rid of it. And I feel like that's happening to Elizabeth Warren now a little bit as well.
True, and I think some of that is maybe there may be a grain of truth to that, but I think that's probably a lot of sexism because I think Elizabeth Warren is pretty. I think I believe what she says. I think that I believe her conversion story from being a Republican to a Democrat, and I've met people like that, and I voted Republican in Ohio, so I was a registered Republican in Ohio in the early zeros. So I don't doubt that people can see the light eventually or go to the dark side or whatever it is, whether Anakin Skywalker or they're the Joker. So I think that people can have these ascents and descents. But that said, part of this is it's a man's world, man. That's the thing. And that's the thing that sucks is it's a chauvinistic world, and they're probably attaching things to her because she's a woman. But what I say right now is, a friend of mine posted, and he's hard left, and he said, well, what do we have besides our principles? I'm like, we have winning. Don't say that. Like, I don't want principles. I don't want to be right. I want to win. I've never about being right. That's why I win. I try to. We're going to be so tired of winning. Why I win, or I try to win, or I'm relatively successful. Is I care about winning. I find one thing I want, and I go after that. I don't care about all the other arguments. I can be wrong. I can be wrong. I can be wrong. But did I get the thing I came for? Okay, the thing we want is the election. And I don't know how much football you follow, but up there in the north, I assume you follow some of it. Which is, the game is you're down by 1 point, and it's American football, and you've just scored your 6 points and you're a point down, right? You've scored your touchdown. Do you go for the extra point? Do you go for the 2-point conversion? And there are rules to this, whether it's a home game, an away game, whatever, you do the probability. At the end of the day, right now, guys, we're an away game. We're strangers in our own country. And right now, we need to go for the extra point. You just need to get to overtime, get to 2024 and run somebody else. Do not go for a 2-point conversion, because if you come up short, the game's over. That's it. So right now, kick the extra point. Who is a safe bet? Who is a moderate that's going to win? I understand finding those voters that may convert from Trumpism over to Bernieism. I understand that. And I'm not saying I'm 100% right, because I called 2016 wrong, and it's the only thing about which I can find that I'm spectacularly wrong, or I was just so wrong. So take everything I said, just like I'm saying about having opinions about things, and throw it out because I don't know. But I would say that history has been a guide that when Democrats nominate somebody really far to the left, because people are like, we've never tried it before. It's like, no, we have. We've done McGovern. We've done Humphreys. We've done Wallace and against Truman. And we have done it. We have nominated liberal people who go down in flames and lose 40 plus states. It is the young, fresh face, I think you can see where I'm going with this, that comes out of seemingly nowhere and wins. And I know JFK was already elected to office. I know Carter. I know Clinton was a governor. I get it. But it is that path. It is the Kennedys. It is the Carters. It's at least the perception of new and young, and Clinton and Obama, the centrist Democrat that is a coalition that seems liberal, but it is also identity politics to some extent. The first Black, the first Catholic, things like that. That's why somebody like a Bernie who's old, a Liz who's a woman, and not my point of view, society's point of view. I like Michael Bloomberg. I like what he's doing. I think he's a real contender to win the general, but can he win the primary? Probably not. Right. But dude, the guy's what, 78-year-old Jew?
Yeah, they're all
78-year-old Jew.
Like same with Biden. Biden's old too.
They're ageist.
Yeah.
And one of those is more justified than the other, by the way.
Yeah, for sure.
Come on, man.
I just feel like, if they really wanted, new ideas, if they really wanted new people to come in and, take the Democratic Party to victory, I feel like they would be leaning more into people like Yang and Tulsi, because those, you might not like those people, but those people have ideas, man. They have plans, they have ideas, they've been there, they've done that, they're all people that have been in the trenches and they've done it, So I feel like if some combination of like Yang or Tulsi ever ran, that would be so good. In my opinion, that would be a pretty potent combo. But I just feel like the Democratic Party is not interested in doing anything with these people, which I think is a little bit unfortunate, because I think 2020 would have been a good time to experiment with new ideas, experiment with new people, see where the future of the Democratic Party lies, rather than have Trump completely obliterate the Democratic Party in 2020 and then build from scratch, rather than sort of course correct a little bit midway.
Yeah, because you see these, Bush talked about George Bush, W. Bush talked about a permanent majority, or Democrats have talked about the demographics of going, the Republicans will be a permanent minority. Just when you think, that you're, I was actually emailing somebody based in the Chicago area, an older white guy, he's probably about 70 years old. He voted for Trump. We're having a conversation. I actually shared some of it with a friend with whom I went to school. He's our high school valedictorian, and he goes, "You're really good at this." He's like, "You're so good about engaging with the other side and reaching out and all that kind of stuff." And I'm just punching myself in the arm, going, I'm so awesome. Like, I'm just such a great, and the world has a way of knocking you down. Like, as soon as you get on your high horse, and luckily the other way too. So just sometimes you think all hope is lost, and then something goes your way, right? And you like, oh, I'm such a swell guy. And then I get this note from somebody on Facebook. And it reads, and I have it here. I didn't respond. There's no response to this. He goes, because this is what I wrote to him. I said, "Hey, thanks for all of the comments. I appreciate them. I decided to stop trying to engage with Trump voters on social media. I'm having some good discussions via email, but as the man in the middle, I'm trying to reconcile between Democrats and Republicans and liberals and conservatives. If it isn't self-evident how awful Trump is, nothing I can say will convince you. I'm still friends with Trump supporters, but we don't discuss politics. It's pointless. Thanks again for the outreach." That's what I wrote.
Right.
He writes back, "Rajiv, how can you bring people together if you don't have dialogue? You're just a big mouth that has no facts to back up what you say. You run down our president, your deep-seated hate for America and American values and Constitution. But our Constitution is
deep-seated hate for America.
The fact that you can't defend your own views, that makes you a very weak and foolish person. With that said, I have no hate for you, and if Trump doesn't win, I won't be crying or marching in streets like the idiots do. Hope you and your family have a blessed Thanksgiving."
Oh my God. There's so many emotions in that one comment. That's crazy.
It's just self-evident.
Yeah.
It's meta, like, ironic, like, like, read what you just wrote. Read what you just wrote. And it's like there's no response to that. Like, I don't respond to these folks. I had an Indian guy out in Jersey say much the same thing to me, and I don't respond. What am I going to say to you? Like, what's the purpose? Like, when I've had a fallings out with my friends. They're my friends. I could sit down and we could talk about it over coffee or whiskey or chai or something, right?
Right.
But I'm going to engage with it. I don't even know him. My friend's like, "How do you know him?" I'm like, "I don't even know." That's your answer. Don't respond. It'll drive him crazy not hearing anything from me until he sees the podcast. So.
You remember when you said that there's a way people look at the ideal Democrat should be this way, the ideal Republican should be this way. Do you feel like there's a feeling among the Indian American community that an ideal Indian should always vote Democrat, that an ideal Indian American should always vote Democrat? Because I heard that argument. I can't remember who made it, but I heard something on Twitter. I'm sure she was an Indian American, and she said that, if you're an Indian American, you should be thankful and you should always be voting Democrat and voting for the people who accepted you with open arms into this country. What do you make of that argument, that an ideal Indian American should always be voting Democrat?
My brother is gay, and I remember the year, I think it was at Argo and Zero Dark 30 came out.
Oh, 2012.
For Best Picture.
Right.
And he's like, "How good is Zero Dark 30? And I go, "Really? You're not an Argo person?" And, not that it was an overly gay movie, but it was more Hollywood and kind of a softer movie. And he goes, "No, I thought Zero Dark 30 was clearly a better film." He goes, and he's a film buff as well. And
right.
He was just saying that, just watch the plot line and whatever else. And he's like, the character development. And so it's a reminder that, yeah, he's gay, but that's not going to define everything about him. That's not the only lens through which he views the world, just because he likes that. I mean, there have been other examples of that were like kind of the gay pick. And again, I'm not saying Argo was an Argo movie, but more artistic and things like that. He liked the hardcore military movie more. And so, again, it's a reminder that your identity doesn't define all of your viewpoints. And so also Indians in this country, South Asians in this country, are immigrants of choice, not necessity. And so blacks were brought here against their will. A lot of Mexicans felt like they had no choice, or Central Americans, or even some South Americans. Indians, very much the cream of the crop. So when people are like, "Oh my gosh, Indians are so smart," Well, yeah, I mean, I guess
You're
I don't
giving the good
know. I
ones.
don't have data to support that, but I would say that the Indian Americans are really intelligent because you've scraped off. My old boss's boss's boss at Procter and Gamble used to say he would knock Harvard Business School. He's like, oh yeah, he goes, it's all in the application process, man. It's all in the recruiting. He's like,
Yeah.
I have an idea. Why don't I take the 700 smartest people and put them in a room for 2 years? Guess what I have? The 700 smartest people.
Yep.
It's like in real estate. It's all in the buy, not in the sell. And so same thing here. It's like you're bringing people who have the resources. It's like, can the aliens beat us? Well, if they can get here, then they have the technology to beat us because they got here. So it's the same thing. Indians and people who are coming here by choice, of course, we're the wealthiest ethnic group in America because you were the cream of the crop. You had the resources to come here. You had people to help you, and you had a network and community, and you had values. And so a lot of blacks, a lot of African Americans are socially conservative. And so they vote Democrat because of their positioning and the way that racists have treated them. Right. But if it were a level playing field, I think the Democrats would lose a lot of black voters, they stand to lose a lot of brown voters. And we talked about this in our last session. Say it like you're a therapist. In our last session, I do talk as much as when I'm in therapy, and it was it's the idea that if the Democratic Party is seen as embracing Muslims, and the Republicans are embracing Hindus, or is driving Hindus into the arms of Donald Trump and the conservatives. Well, with 10,000, 12,000, 15,000 vote differences in, with PAWI, as I call it, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin, for once, we could actually turn the election. And so, and that's Trump was very smart to go down and invite himself to open for Modi and things like that, or speak on stage with Modi. So I think Democrats have to be very careful here. And I said this, and my parents were like, oh, you should be careful with what you say. But I go, look, I'm saying no religion gets a free pass. No group of people gets a free pass. Nobody should, whether you're Jewish or Muslim or Christian or an atheist or Hindu, whatever you are, nobody should get a free pass. Everybody should be scrutinized. Everybody should be under the microscope. Everybody should be examined. I don't mean in a fascist sort of way, but we should all be discussing things. And it shouldn't be like, no, that we can't talk about a two-state solution, or no, we can't talk about the hijab, or no, we can't talk about why the cow is sacred, or no, we all need to be discussing everything and helping people understand, if we're Hindus, why the cow is sacred. People need to explain the hijab. They need to explain whatever it is. Everybody is on the hook here to explain your point of view. And it's not enough just to say, well, no, we're just going to accept any religion blindly. And if we do that, yes, I think you could see an exodus of Hindu Indians from the Democrat to the Republican Party. And said, no, I do not agree with the statement that we should just vote Democrat. I think they need to earn our vote just like anyone else.
Yeah, I think so, because the question that you raised, the point that you raised about being able to question everything here in the US, where we have you have the First Amendment, and I think that you should have the right to be able to question everything. Like for instance, like what if, a lot of the times I see this thing that we call soft bigotry of low expectations, where we say, well, that's their culture. I don't think it's right for us to question somebody else's culture. But then the Hindus can turn around and be like, well, then stop talking about caste. Stop asking questions about caste. It's our culture. But we ask those questions because those questions are 100% valid. When you say that just because so-and-so was born in this family and not in this family, does that make him any less than this other person? Maybe that's not what the scriptures say, but that's how society has treated it over the past few centuries. And so it's wrong. And it is well within our rights to question it and call it wrong. So when we can do that without feeling any sense of guilt or shame, and we're not doing it out of any hatred for Hindus, we're doing it because it's right. It's the right thing to do. And so when we ask the question, well, okay, there are plenty of women that wear the hijab completely on their own free will. But then there are also millions of women in the Middle East and other Muslim countries around the world that don't have a choice in the matter. So when we discussed this, we're not doing it out of bigotry necessarily. I'm sure some people are.
Sure.
But I like to think that I'm not doing it because I hate Muslims. I'm doing it because there's a little bit of a double standard here. And I'm also doing it because it's a shame that those women are being forced to wear something that they don't necessarily want to wear. So I think me asking that question or anybody asking that question doesn't necessarily make them a bigot by virtue of asking that question.
I completely agree. I think that questions should be asked, and it's important to be inquisitive, not maybe to conduct an inquisition, but to be inquisitive. And I think the way that people look at it is, well, Muslims, especially in America, a lot around the world, but especially in America, are oppressed. And so since they're oppressed, well, then don't ask, but look, when you do that, that's the problem, right? So I'm good friends with Sparsh Shah. Sparsh Shah is a singer who lives in New Jersey. He's about 15 years old. He's a great singer. You got to check him out. Google Sparsh Shah. He opened for Modi actually in Houston. He's been doing a lot of great things. I just stayed with his family when I went to Jersey. He's got a brittle bone disease where he fractures and breaks bones all the time. It's extremely sad, but he's so inspiring because he can rap, he can sing. He's an inspiration. His family's great. And so the other day he had a show, and I thought about it before I wrote it, but I'm like, break a leg, right? Because that's what we say in show business, right? So should I not say break a leg to somebody with brittle bone disease? Because he's breaking a leg all the time, right? But no, don't treat him differently. Like I'm making fun of his wheelchair, the fact that he's got a tray, and I'm just like, oh, well, just put it on his tray. It's kind of great that you've got a built-in tray. Like you don't ever. Because I'm a comedian. That's the way we show love. That's the way we're inclusive. That's why we bust on everybody. They all say you roast the ones you love. If I don't like you, I'm not even going to talk about you. And you're going to tell by the tone in my voice that I don't like you. But if I'm busting on you and ribbing you and saying break a leg, even though you have brittle bone disease, I'm not making fun of you. I'm being inclusive because that's the way I speak to everybody.
Right.
And realizing that the sensitivity there and understanding that, well, realizing that it may land a certain way because he may take it a different way. I'm not saying just punch everybody equally. That's not what I'm saying. But in a good-natured ribbing sort of way. It's not, oh, no, don't ever make a joke about someone in a wheelchair. Well, then you're leaving the person out. That's not fair then. I did a joke about the other day. I was in Cincinnati and I was doing a private gig, and a friend of mine there was there with whom I grew up, and his dad is in a wheelchair. Well, I have a joke, and I saw that he was there, but I have a joke about how my parents went with me to India because I'm 43 years old. And, we flew Indian first class. And I go, if you don't know about Indian first class, you ask for a wheelchair. Because that way you get to the front of the line, right? You go to the front of security, you get escorted on the plane, you get escorted off the plane, you get like first class treatment at economy prices. Indians are not cheap. We were just smart. We found the loophole in the system, man. So gets a big a laugh, applause, whatever. I'm aware, and as a comedian, you're going to be aware of how the dynamic may be affected if somebody's in a wheelchair. But then have the balls, man. If that's a joke you do, you're just a dick then. So you're going to say it behind his back, or you're going to say break a leg to other people, but you're not going to say it. Like, you're just disingenuous now. Like, that's ridiculous. Like, you're being, this is the problem with the overwoke left, right? Don't say this. This is the fascism on the left. Like, don't say this. Be sensitive. You are being sensitive. You're being funny, and you're being happy, and you're being friendly, and you're bringing people into the circle. And so being aware, that's good to be aware, but you still want to treat people the same way you otherwise would. You're a comedian. You can make fun of everybody, right?
Right.
Make fun of everybody. What's the difference?
Yeah, that's fair. And I feel like, there have been instances in the past where, one of the things that has been very common now is don't use certain words, don't say certain words to refer to certain people, and don't say that. We say that things have gotten out of hand with these words, with not using certain words and using certain others. But this has happened in the past as well, where certain words that were considered okay to say at certain points of time were then later on not considered okay to say, and they went out of vogue. And in a lot of ways, it happened with a little bit of shaming, but generally speaking, these words were considered, all right, let's just get rid of this one. Let's just not say this word to refer to these people. But now it's gotten to an extent where the shaming is just insane. Like, I don't know if you remember there's a bit that Tom Segura did in his special, where he was talking about Louisiana, and he was talking about the people of Louisiana. He said we should build a wall around Louisiana, and people got mad at that. But the other thing that people got really, really mad at when he said the word retard, what he was using, it was the R word he said, and people got really, 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 really upset at that, and they were like, cancel his Netflix specials, like get him out of a job, and rah, rah, rah. And I can understand people not wanting to use that word to refer to people. I can understand that. And maybe eventually that word will go out of vogue. Fine, sure. I'm fine with that too. But is trying to take someone's livelihood the right way to go about it?
Well, there's a guy, and I think it's called Some More News, and he gives a really good point of view. His videos get hundreds of thousands of views,
Right.
and he talked about how cancel culture really isn't a thing. Like, he goes, show me a person who's actually been canceled who didn't really deserve, like someone who did something really awful. I think it's like sports, right? Where you compare people across eras. Like, how do you compare Ty Cobb and Roger Maris and Babe Ruth and A-Rod and Derek Jeter? How do you compare all these people across eras?
Right.
And you do it by indexing. You do it by, at the time, how were they, right? Michael Jordan versus LeBron James versus Steph Curry. You do it at the time. You look at how were they beating their competition at the time. And so, because the game gets stronger and athletes get stronger. So you have to look at Justin Trudeau or Ralph Northam or any of these people. Ralph Northam was a guy in Virginia. I was getting him and the North Carolina guy mixed up. But at any rate, it's the idea of, at that time, was wearing blackface at a party in 1982 or whatever it was that like, oh my gosh? Or there have been parties where a lot of us got really loaded, right? But as long as you weren't the drunkest person at the party, everybody got drunk. Like, what are you talking about? It was a New Year's Eve party. Everybody, like, as long as you didn't do anything crazy or say anything crazy, everybody was drinking. But if you're the guy with a lampshade on your head, then yeah, that's probably, if you're mooning a cop, then yeah, I guess the index would be if everybody mooned a cop, then maybe it's okay. But I guess there's that speaks to like absolute morality. But I think there's a point where you go, what's the index? What were people doing at the time? And I won't say who, but there's a guy who was telling me that we used to measure distances when we would drive. And he's like, by the number of beers we would drink. He's like, this is about 3 beers. And he lived out in the country, and that's just what they did. That's just what they did. All right. And it's like, would people do that now? People hear this and they gasp, like, oh my gosh, are you kidding? Like pearl clutching, And yes, it probably was wrong. But at the same time, you have to judge people at the standard. So if Tom Segura is using retard now, yeah, that's not okay. I think that's a word that, it's kind of been deemed as like, that's not okay to say, and it is mean and whatever else. At the same time, you can't use that word to describe people who are actually mentally challenged. At the same time, it's not an insult. So it's sort of sitting vacant. It's a word that you just can't use at all. It's just kind of gone. And it's sad because it is kind of a great word. The sound of it is great. It's like,
that's what it is again. I agree that this word that I'm going to say shouldn't be used in this context as well. I think we're past that point where using this word in this context is okay, and I'm fine with it. I don't need to use that word to describe certain feelings or certain things. Like, I remember back in like 2004, 2005, it was 100% okay that if you thought something was lame, you'd say, dude, that's gay. That's so gay. That was 100% okay.
Totally.
Now it's not, and I'm fine with it. I don't need to use that word to describe something that's lame. You know what I mean?
You can't. And I say it. I was saying it around the house for a while just to be funny. And then one day Hersha said it back to me, and she said it like really said, like, oh my gosh, that's how it sounds. She goes, yes, that's what you sound like when you say it. And I go, oh wow, that really doesn't sound good. Because I know, because you're saying it, you're not hearing yourself say it. And I go, yeah, that's really bad. She goes, yes, that's why people. So she, to prove a point. I was like, I don't know, I didn't really sleep that much. It was just so gay. And she's like, okay, God, you can't say that. And until I heard it, I'm like, and she goes, your brother's gay. Like, I go, well, he knows what I mean. She goes, you cut it out. Like, it just doesn't land. She goes, it just sounds awful. And so I stopped. It was just. Okay, I had to hear what it sounded like coming out of my sweet wife's mouth, and I'm like, oh,
I think intent really matters as well. I think we need to start focusing a little more on intent than just the word itself, because sometimes somebody in the heat of the moment just said, "Oh, dude, that's so gay." All right, it wasn't right what they said, but they're not going out of their way to disenfranchise gay people in America. That's not what they're trying to do when they say it. They just said something dumb in the heat of the moment and they felt like that word would get their point across the best.
Yeah, I mean, they were just being retarded.
Yeah, they were Well, this video got demonetized, so there's that.
Yeah, there's that. You're gay, retarded. We talked about it.
There you go. Yeah, we got everything off the list.
I know. I've got time, but I mean, I don't know if I wanted to ask you a question about because the presidential candidates, because that was the original. I know we were gonna talk about the debate, which we have. Why do you like Yang and Gabbard? Like, are you like those two, or those your two, or who are you?
I do like them. I like Gabbard because, you know, I would, and the reason I said I would like a combination of Gabbard and sort of Yang, and preferably I'd have Gabbard as the president and Yang as like the vice president, because the vice president often deals with a lot of the domestic stuff, and the president is often the commander in chief and the sort of envoy of the United States overseas and all of that. And I think for that purpose, Tulsi Gabbard is something that she could be really, really good, because again, she served, she knows what we're doing, what America is doing overseas. And so, and I completely agree with her position of not necessarily getting involved in wars that America doesn't need to get involved in, which is not an isolationist stance, which I think people often get confused and they say, well, that's isolationist. No, that's not the classic libertarian isolationist stance. She's saying we don't need to get involved in wars that we don't need to be a part of.
Nation building.
We don't need to stick our noses where it doesn't belong. That's different from being isolationist. That's saying if a war comes to us, yeah, we'll fight it. But we're not saying that we're just going to, you know, hide inside our shells like a turtle. So I think she has a really good ear for foreign policy. And I think she'll be a very good commander in chief. I think she'll be strong on terror while being able to build alliances and relationships across political lines overseas and domestically as well, because that's a big important thing that people forget presidents needs to do, that they need to build alliances across political lines. That's what Obama was trying to do, and which is why they now call him a conservative. So in that ways, I like Tulsi. Another why I like Yang is because I think he has a lot of interesting policies on the domestic front in terms of, you know, fixing the economy. He's the only guy who's really seriously talking about what's going to happen to the job market and to the economy as a result of automation.
Mm-hmm.
It's a massive challenge that nobody seems to really be thinking about. It's coming. There's nothing anybody can do about it. And if people are not prepared, it's going to hit them like a freight truck in 20 years. And people will not know what to do. Like if people think, you know, jobs are a problem right now, wait 20 years till automation really kicks in. And then, you know, 2/3 or half of the population is finding itself out of a job. So I think he's really thinking about that situation. He's thinking ahead. The UBI thing, I don't know 100% if it's going to work, but it's definitely an interesting idea. You know, he's talking about democracy dollars, which again, it would probably require some kind of taxation, but it's still an interesting idea in the sense that everybody gets a certain amount of money to give to the, you know, candidate that they like. And so it kind of takes away the power of massive donors. Like you don't have to call up a massive donor and beg them for millions of dollars, where they have the same amount of money to spend as, you know, average Joe working a plumber's job. So I think those guys have interesting ideas. Those guys have interesting plans. I don't know if all of those plans are 100% feasible, but I like young people with plans. Now, these are both young people that clearly love America deeply, that clearly want the best for America and Americans. They're savvy. They're funny. At least Yang is very funny.
That counts for something for me.
Right? That counts as something for me. Absolutely. Right? Like Obama was funny. I didn't agree with a lot of what he did, but he was funny. He was a funny guy. So you immediately liked him. All right, this dude's funny.
I was in on that because he was a funny guy, and that goes a long way. Well, it shows warmth and wit and a lot of the things that he possessed, for sure.
Yeah, precisely. And so those are the reasons. Like they're young, they're dynamic, they have plans, they have ideas, concrete ideas that they have put on paper that they can, you know, put into practice as soon as they get into office.
Right.
And I like that. I like that. That, Elizabeth Warren talks about this plan that she's going to do, and now you have various liberal organizations, liberal publications like the Washington Post coming out and saying that it's an infeasible plan. Like, it's going to cost 32 trillion over 10 years, which that's a big amount to raise.
It's a monumental amount of money.
Yeah,
it really is. And people say, well, what about the tax cut, or what about military spending and all that? Yeah, definitely those things. But you're talking about an order of magnitude here, literally an order of magnitude. I mean, we're talking a couple trillion versus tens of trillions. So I think she lost the nomination. When she went with the all in on her plan, she really stumbled through that, how she's going to pay for it, and not really saying that she's going to raise taxes. And Bernie, at least, that's why you're seeing the disingenuous label attached to her, because people aren't.
Because at least Bernie's like honest about it. Yeah, your taxes are going to go up.
Yeah, he just said that. He's like, but your cost will go down, right? It's just like, they see this is what my dad used to do with gas. He would drive around looking for the cheapest price on gas. I'm like, yes, you found the lowest price, but your cost was higher, and he would just never accept it. Like, I'm like, you're burning gas as you were looking for gas.
Yeah.
A, and then B, you're not attaching the time value of money. You're not valuing how much you are worth, because you're spending 45 minutes on a 10-minute errand. And if it's your leisure time anyway, then fine. But understand that everything has a cost. Everything has an opportunity cost. You're driving around for an extra 35 minutes looking for gas. That's 35 minutes you could have been sitting and relaxing, getting your mind chilled for work the next day, whatever. And so Indians especially have a hard time grasping this. We think price, you don't think cost.
Yes.
And you're willing to do anything to go get that $20 shirt that's 2 hours away. When you just buy the $40 shirt that's right next door, and you just can't get there's something visceral, just like, it's not even in the head, it's in the gut. Like, I just can't bring myself. It's like, no, you just bought yourself. You just spent that in gas. You spent that in time. And so there's that angle, that aspect. So I think for me, I mean, I think I'll probably wait until the beginning of the year to kind of make an endorsement. Not, I mean, a couple campaigns have asked me for a formal endorsement, but I don't know that I would go with necessarily any of those. But I think I'm looking for somebody who can win, right? I think a lot of us are, and I think that Stacey Abrams is the ace in the hole for the Democrats. And I've said this for months now, that not to play the identity politic game all in, but a Black woman from not yet a swing state, Georgia, but if she's the VP, and the VP doesn't usually swing too much, but you drive Black turnout, you drive female turnout, you got somebody who isn't hyper liberal, you've got somebody who is a great VP candidate. I'm talking about especially if you have a white man at the top of the ticket, and again, not to go full identity politics here, and I would totally vote for a woman, but my brother the other day, my gay brother in Brooklyn, was saying that he knows a lot of men who straight up said, we're not voting for a woman. And I was like, they say that? Like, who comes out and says that? Like, A, I don't even believe that. But I mean, I don't believe that about myself. I believe what he's saying. But B, I don't know, people so openly spoke like that. But then this is
I didn't know that either.
Right? People appealing to people's better angels or worse angels. And that's the difference between Obama and Trump. People felt on the right that he was putting them down subtly. And maybe he was clinging to guns and religion and things like that, although I don't think that's what he was trying to do, but okay. But not this blatantly, where you just bring out the worst angels of people. So I think I'd like to see somebody like a Bloomberg. He's moderate. He stands up for like guns and climate change are two of his big topics and stuff like that. I need to learn a little bit more about him. I don't know how far he's going to go. He's got a ton of money, but is he going to win over the crowd? I mean, he had some Me Too problems. He's had some stop and frisk problems, and those are real. I'm not saying, well, who cares? Those are real. I don't know, but that's probably, despite the fact that, he's young. I'm obviously pivoting here, not Bloomberg. Young and the mayor of a small town and the gay thing, but that's where I see Mayor Pete, man. That's where I just see somebody like that who's moderate, he's centrist, he's a fresh, clean face, he's the new generation. I think people look at Joe Biden and they think, after all of that, that we went through for 4 years, we're just going to go back to where we came.
Yeah.
Right. We've all had this where there's a sunk cost aspect as well, but you're driving somewhere and you go, now we're halfway.
Right.
And the party, we're stuck in traffic, but do we go or do we turn around and go home? It's like, at this point in time, do you want to go or do you want to go home? And that's going to affect your sunk cost calculation. But if you still want to go to the party and you still want social justice, you still want to move forward, we didn't come this way, all this way, and brave this storm just to go back to normal and restoration. And when people see Biden, they see the past. And with Mayor Pete, you see the future.
Right.
And that's where I see someone like him paired up with a Stacey Abrams, and I go, that's 400 electoral votes. I see a massive victory for someone like that. I don't think Yang and Gabbard can win the nomination. I think they're just
I don't think that's gonna happen either.
And Yang, I like him, but
he'll do well nationally. But yeah, like for getting the Democrat nomination, it's hard.
I think Bloomberg, the difference there, even though he's older and he's Jewish and he's got some of these problems that Democrats don't like, I think he's just got so much money.
Yeah.
And
when he came in, I was like, dude, just let money versus money, just fight him out.
And real money.
And real money.
Like Coming to America, I'm telling you, the boy's got his own money. I mean, we talk about 50 billion. You forgot that he's at 52. Like that, we're rounding $2 billion down.
Right.
And I mean, you can't count someone out who's got that who's got that. That said, I see Elizabeth Warren going forward. I see this maybe even going to the convention, but the Democrats have Mayor Pete. And I know a lot of older African-American voters are saying they've got issues with sexuality, and I can understand that, but we didn't know we were ready for a black president.
Exactly.
I didn't think all the way down to election night. I didn't think it was
Yeah.
I thought people were going to go into the booth and then
not
do it. But I think I've got concerns in that he is young, really young, mayor of a small town, but Trump had no experience, and he's a commander in chief. So,
I mean, there you go. All right. Well, tell you what, it's when is it? I forgot. When is it that we're gonna have a definitive candidate, a nominee? When is that gonna happen?
Well, the convention I think is in July in Wisconsin, I believe.
Oh, that's right.
But that'll be like the official.
Yeah.
Usually these things are wrapped up on Super Tuesday in March. Usually
March we'll know.
But it wasn't a sure thing. Hillary was winning a lot of the primaries. Bernie was winning the caucuses. And that's another thing against Bernie is that he wins a lot. But people are like, yeah, but those are caucuses. They're not primaries. So I think we may not know until April. There may not be a breakout candidate. But in my opinion, I think the Democrats will probably go with someone like a Warren, and he'll lose. Yeah, I don't think he'll win.
Yeah, I mean, if they're
Warren will win, but I don't think she will.
Yeah, I don't think she'll win. I don't think she'll win if she wins the nomination either. But we'll see. You know, we'll take a look and we'll see what happens. We'll see how it all pans out, and I'm sure we'll talk again. It was good talking to you again. Thanks for doing the show once again. It was good having you on.
It's great always to see you, Sham. I'll be in the Chicago area. I'm going to be doing the Skokie Theater. Skokie Theater in Skokie, Illinois, greater Chicagoland area. Go to crajiv.com. That's SEERAJIV.com. Or go to my website, funnyindian.com. You can get tickets to go to the Skokie Theater. It's a great venue. I did it last time, and that's January 17th, 2020. So Friday, January 17th. Come check it out and follow me at Funny Indian on all the handles and whatever, and tell me how wrong I am about everything. I seem to be getting the messages. So that's when you know you're making it, right? Cat Williams talked about the more haters you have,
that's right.
The better you're
there you go. Well, all right then.
Great interview, Sham. It's always great to spend time with you.
Thanks a lot, man. I really appreciate it. Thanks for coming on, and let's talk soon. Yeah,
let's do it.
All right, guys. Thanks very much for watching again. Check out Rajiv's shows. Check out his tour. See where he's performing again. If you're in Chicago on the 17th of January, come check us out. I'm gonna try and be there for sure. Rajiv is gonna be performing, so it's gonna be fantastic. Other than that, guys, if you liked today's episode, subscribe, like, share, comment, all of that fun stuff. I'll see you guys for the next one. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you guys soon.